Hey, welcome back. I'm Christian, and today we're talking about eighth notes, our first new rhythm. So, if you remember back to the very first few lessons, I've talked about the staff and how the staff is split up into measures, which are dictated by the time signature. The time signature tells you how long each measure has to be. We learned about the 4/4 time signature, the 3/4 time signature, and the 5/4 time signature. Now, 4/4 time, which is probably the most common in the United States, means that there are four beats that pulse. There's four of them. We count to four. And that when we feel that pulse, what we're counting is quarter notes. So with that in mind, we can start looking at other note durations. So in the past, we've looked at half notes and whole notes. A half note is a duration of a note that counts for two beats. So for 1, 2, 3, 4, a half note would count for the first two or the second two or whatever. It would cover two of those beats. And the whole note covers four of those beats. Now the eighth note is the first duration that we look at that starts shortening the beat. It starts shortening the amount of sound. And in the case of the eighth note, it's actually doubling the number of sounds. So if we look at my notes here, I've added a few things to our elements of music chart that we started with in our first lesson. The whole note, which is notated by a single empty note head, counts for four beats in this measure of 4/4. Now the half note counts for two beats, so you have two of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. The half note is built with an empty note head. That's what this note head means here. This is the note head, right? And it's built with a stem. So empty note head, stem is a half note, and it counts for two beats for a total of four. Remember, your measure has to equal, your measure has to add up. So if we're in 4/4, you have to have four quarter note beats in that measure. The whole note is four quarter note beats. So you only have one. You can't put any more, and you have to have that. You can't have any fewer. When you have half notes, you have to have two because there are four quarter note beats. You have to account for all those beats. Now we're in quarter notes here. We have four quarter note beats. They're spelled out, every single one. These are the stems, built the same way as a half note, except their note heads are filled in dark. Okay, so we have a filled note head, empty note head, and this is the stem. Eighth notes are half of quarter notes. So there are two eighth notes for every quarter note, split evenly. That would mean that there are 8 eighth notes in a measure, and they can be written a couple different ways. The first way is a single eighth note with a flag. You'll notice it has a filled in note head, it has a stem, but then it has this little swirly little flag guy. That indicates an eighth note. Now, like I said, there are two eighth notes for every quarter note. So we have 1, 2. I'm going to put a little dotted line through this. That is beat 1. That is the same as one quarter note. Okay? Now, you can also write eighth notes with what is known as a beam. The beam is this dark line. And the beam joins two eighth notes, and it actually makes it a little bit easier to see the full beat. Because remember, we still have to account for every single beat in a measure. Now, remember, no fewer, no more. It has to be exactly the same. So here's two eighth notes. If you wrote every single eighth note as flags, you can do that, but then you have to count. Do I have 8 of them? This makes it a little bit easier. With a single beam, you know that you've got 2 of them covered. This is a whole beat. So this is beat number 2 in this measure. Another way composers will write eighth notes to make them even easier to see is they will beam more together. So in this case, they've beamed 4 eighth notes together, and that is 2 beats on its own. This is beat 3, and this is beat 4. So again, the composer is going to make decisions on how to beam, how to do things based on how they want you to perform the music, and they also want to make it easier for you to understand when you read it. So that's what they look like. Let's hear how they sound, right? I'm going to go over to Joel Rothman's teaching rhythm, page 7. I hope I don't need that page again. That just flew away. But here we are on page 7 in Joel Rothman's teaching rhythm. I'm going to grab my metronome because we'll probably need that And I'm sorry, I keep messing with my microphone. I'll edit that out, but I'm sure I'm like playing bass beats on my chest, right? So, eighth notes. Eighth notes, page 7. Um, my student had this interesting thought yesterday. It was interesting seeing him having this epiphany, like right in front of me. We're learning about eighth notes, and he goes, "Oh, the eighth notes happen before the click." And what he was hearing, probably for the first time, was that the click is quarter notes, and it's steady, right? We have the metronome going, and it's steady. The eighth notes fit in the space between the clicks at the exact dead center, like a bullseye, dead center. And the way we're able to keep track of that, and count it, is when we're counting quarter notes, 1, 2, 3, 4. We can count the syllable an or and in between those spaces. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And that is where the eighth note goes, right on that and. It's dead center, right in the middle. And this is really important to note because as we learn more complex rhythms, at least in the very beginning, they will continue to line up in the dead center of the note previous to it. So if we were to build what they call a table of time, where you start with the whole note at the top, the whole note counts as 4. Then when you split it into 2, you get 2 half notes, right? And then when you split a half note into 2, you get 2 quarter notes here and 2 quarter notes here for 4 quarter notes. Then you split that, you get 8 notes, you get 8 eighth notes, and you continue on. As you add complexity, the note actually splits the difference of the one above it. It goes right in between the two above it. That'll make more sense once we start getting more complex. But this is important. So what I'm doing when I'm counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and is I'm counting what are called subdivisions. And when you work through these pages, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you count out loud your subdivisions. What that does is it keeps you on target with the tempo. And it will help you with your placement not only of the eighth notes themselves, but it will make your quarter notes that much more solid. Now, if you go back a couple of videos, I had a click going and I was just trying to play quarter notes to a click. It's a little bit like trying to hit a moving target. And especially if I'm talking all that stuff, it's not like, there's somewhere it's like I'm not in time. I'm not even in time with just straight quarter notes. That gets easier when you subdivide. And it gets even easier still when you start subdividing even smaller durations. So if you're counting out eighth notes and clapping quarter notes, those quarter notes, 1 and 2 and 3, like you are going to start hitting those much better. And so the sooner you're able to internalize this feeling, this count, practicing with the metronome and feeling where these grooves are, the better musician you're going to be. It's very common for people to see more complex rhythms and just think these are faster and they just rush them. They're not necessarily faster. You could be playing at a very slow tempo and see a complex rhythm and it's not fast yet. It's just a very specific place and subdivision that you need to be counting to be able to play that rhythm accurately. I'm talking a lot. Let's play a little bit. Now, here's another thing. I'm going to talk some more. My metronome, and yours may have this too, has the ability to do the subdivision for you. Okay, and I'm going to play it so you hear it, but I need to emphasize this is not a crutch. I would not use this when I practice. So if I were doing eighth note practice, I would not set the eighth note click and play along to it because that's relying on the machine to count for me, and really I want to rely on my own inner clock to count for me. So here we go. This is going to be quarter notes. And what I've done is I've changed the settings so it beeps higher than it did in the previous videos. It's a little more piercing. Okay? That's my quarter note. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the eighth notes are going to go right in between. Okay? Now this is like mechanical, so it should be like more than perfect. So I'm going to turn up the volume on the eighth notes very slightly so you can hear them start sneaking in. But what I really want you to notice is the fact that the 1, 2, 3, 4 part of this doesn't change. And that's what's really important here. The beat stays the same, right? And then the eighth notes start filling in the gaps. Nothing else moves. It doesn't have to shift or get all kind of squirrely to make room for eighth notes. They fit in between. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and I'll slow it down again, or I'll lower it again. 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. There you go. So that is the mechanical version of eighth notes. They should be like right on the money, perfectly spot on. Let's now finally play a page in Joel Rothman's Teaching Rhythm. I'm going to play my metronome. I'm going to switch it back to the lower thing because that is a piercing sound, that high note. Okay, that's normal. Again, we're at 70. And I hope you can see my page here. You can see my metronome. I didn't mention this. You know, your metronome also has a light, and if you're playing right in time with your metronome, you'll actually start to drown out the sound of the click. You won't hear it anymore. But the light is there, and that's a great way to make sure that you're still in time, because once the metronome sound kind of merges with your playing and it disappears, you'll at least be able to see the click. You'll be able to see the flash to know that you're still in time. So I'm going to subdivide out loud. We're in 4/4 time. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I'm going to do my magical scrolling finger, which you should still see. Yes, I'm still filming over there. Good job. Film that, and I'm going to play right here on my knee the rhythm, and hopefully you hear that. Hopefully I got microphones all over this place, so hopefully you're hearing this. I'll have the metronome going. I'll count out loud. I'll do the scrolling finger, play on my knee. We're making music, people. So here we go. 4 up front, like last time. 1 and 2 and 3 and go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So there you go. That's how it works. Now what's really cool, you know, I think I mentioned this before, is that wherever you have a quarter note, you can also play 2 eighth notes in that space. It's this kind of like idea, I've never heard it said before, it's kind of like a conservation of time. So like, you know, when you have a quarter note, you can also have 2 eighth notes in there. And it's this idea that you can like substitute and swap out. And it's really important idea to think about, especially when you start reading really complex music, where they start using notation to get some musical ideas across, and you're kind of like, where's the beat? Where is the beat? And you can actually do the math and like, okay, there's beat 1, beat 2. You can kind of figure it out based on your note durations. So again, your eighth note, 2 eighth notes take up 1 quarter note space. And so with that, that's how this book is written. This is why I love these Joel Rothman books, because he gives you a lot. Break my metronome. He gives you a lot of options, and he shows you all these different combinations so that you get used to seeing them. So if we're looking here on the top line, he's got 1, 2, 3, and then the eighth note pair is on beat 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, right? In the second line, he shifts it over. He puts that eighth note pair on the 3. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. On the second line, he moves it over again. Now the eighth note pair is on beat 2. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4. And then the last time he puts the eighth note pair on beat 1. 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So this book is great because it shows you all these combinations. Don't forget to do repeats between the different sections. And again, keep counting out loud. You're going to be counting out loud for a long time. So get used to it now while it's simple, because when it's difficult, it's not the time to learn to count. Next up, I'm going to go through a couple of these other pages. I'm not going to play them. I'm just going to explain them. We're on page 8 now. Probably can't really see that too well. Page 8. He continues with the process. Basically, he substitutes 2 beats with eighth notes instead of just 1 beat. When he goes to page 9, he's now substituting 3 beats with eighth notes. So it's 3 sets of eighth notes and 1 quarter note. On page 10, he summarizes all your previously learned rhythms. And this is pretty cool because he can show you then that you have eighth notes can take the place of quarter notes. Quarter notes can take the place of half notes. So, or maybe the other way around. You can put one half note for two quarter notes, or you could do two eighth notes for one quarter note. So he starts mixing these things up. He has quarter note rests, he has half note rests, half notes are being played, etc. Now, the final summary page, page 11, we have a summary in 3/4 and a summary in 5/4. Don't let those time signatures get you feeling crazy. Again, the top number tells you how many beats there are. The bottom number tells you what type of note gets the beat. So in 3/4 time, we discussed this before, it's just, we have a pulse. This time we're calling it a count of 3. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's our pulse. And what we're saying is when you feel this pulse, it is a quarter note. Okay, so we have 3 quarter notes in these measures. I'll do a quick thing. Again, eighth notes, a pair of eighth notes takes the place of one quarter note. Doesn't matter if it's 4/4 time or 5/4 time or 3/4. 2 eighth notes is one quarter note. So here we go. I'll count out loud, tap on my hand, my knee here, and just go through this first line. 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 1 and 2 and 3. So keep counting, only counting to 3, subdivide. Get those eighth notes happening, whether you're in 4 or 3 or 5, and you'll play this correctly. The final summary is in 5/4. Again, it's 5 beats in a measure, quarter note gets a beat. We're counting to 5, and it's 5 quarter notes. That's all it means. It's not very scary, okay? So we're doing the same thing. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2. That's all we're doing. I'll play through the first line on my knee the same way I just did this. And I'm out of breath. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 5. Oh, I messed up because I was breathing. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and. There we go. I swear I know what I'm doing, people. So that's the eighth note section up through page 11. In the next video, we're going to talk about eighth note rests, because just like quarter notes and half notes and whole notes, we have sound and then we have the absence of sound. So an eighth note rest takes up the same amount of time as the eighth note, but it's, basically it's a short silence. It's shorter than a quarter note silence. That's basically the lesson. I just gave it to you, but we're going to go into more depth. Also wanted to point out before I go, there's a whole note in this last measure. He loves doing that. Remember, the whole note is for 4 whole beats. So I think that's everything. There are no other new elements to point out in here. Remember the parts of the note, because now this is going to be important going forward. We have the note head, we have the stem, we have a beam, or we have a flag, and I guess that's it. I'm going to stop there. So thanks for joining me. Again, remember to like and subscribe. I'm going through Teaching Rhythm by Joel Rothman, all the way through some very complex, like college level reading and rhythm exercises. That's further down the road, but we're starting at the very beginning here. So yeah, please subscribe so you can join us on that journey. You can also go to my website, which is christianjohnsondrums.com. I have other drum set lessons and pad exercises, more like drummer focused things over there. But that's it. There's nothing here. The camera's there. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time.